Welcome to the CMO Spotlight. And I'm so excited today because I'm here with the Chief Marketing Officer of Teradata, Jacqueline Woods. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thanks, Joe. It's really good to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to have this conversation. Um, Teradata is one of those companies that I think a lot of people have heard of, but don't always know exactly what it is or what you all do. So I'm wondering if we could just start by you're telling us a little bit about the company and what Teradata does.
Yeah, it's interesting because Teradata has actually been a company for almost 40 years and really started with some engineers out of Caltech. They were some of the early founders, and it really began as a company that was trying to, or a problem to be solved, which was helping people store, manage, and analyze data. And that has been a conundrum for a long time, certainly before Teradata was in existence. But today, the company has evolved to a cloud data and analytics company, really focus on uh, that corpus of data and analytics and trusted AI. So that is where we are today.
Excellent. Well, I know you actually went to undergrad at University of California, Davis, and then ended up at graduate school, graduate from University of Southern California, the Marshall School of Business there. I didn't see that you were an engineer by trade. So how did you end up in a company? Was your background focused mostly on marketing, and that led you to the job, or do you moonlight as an engineer?
I wouldn't say that I as an engineer, but what I will say is that math was always my favorite subject, and my background from undergrad is actually managerial economics, so very, very math focused.
Hmm.
And when I was in undergrad, I actually did take the math that was for engineers. There were kind of like two levels of mathematics when you're at the university, one for kind of, just standard whatever, and then one if you're going to become an engineer, there are certain classes that you had to take, and I actually did take those math classes. And so I have always liked math. I've always enjoyed what people would describe as problem solving and critical thinking. For me as a marketer, I think that is my secret sauce and kind of my superpower is the fact that I bring that type of critical thinking to marketing. And sometimes marketers are criticized for not having that, and it's totally not true.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's some that come at it from a very creative angle, and there's some that come at it from a very analytical angle. And you maybe lean on the analytical side of things, which is a good thing, particularly for a company that does some pretty amazing, kind of engineering feats to deliver what you deliver for your customers.
Exactly. I think you have to have a bit of both because marketing ultimately is about storytelling. And so, I met someone probably about 15 years ago that said something very interesting to me, and I've never forgotten. Her husband was actually a litigator, and her daughter was taking this kind of course that high schoolers take that at NYU, but it was like this drama program. And my daughter happened to be in this program too. And we were just two parents talking and learning about each other and talking about our kids. And she said to me, my husband, was very, not demanding, but kind of insisting that my daughter take this class because of the importance of learning how to tell a story. And my husband is a chief litigator, but you should watch how he spins a tale when he is speaking to a jury. And
Hmm.
so, and so, what I took away from that just kind of it was really reinforcing what I felt all along as a marketer, that unquestionably the most important thing that a marketer can do is really tell a story that brings people along on a journey for better understanding and then you may have an opportunity to sell something.
Right.
But the important point is telling that story. I don't think you can do that well if you don't have, the right type of data and evidence to back that up. And so I do think that sometimes there's this disconnect in terms of what people think marketers are or what they do, because everything that we do should kind of be rooted in this data and analytics in order to be able to tell that story.
Yes, there's most definitely a left brain, right brain aspect of marketing, and it sounds like you're focused on being good at both. Where they intersect is where the magic happens, I think.
That's what I truly think. I
Yeah.
actually do think that's where the magic happens. I
Yeah.
don't think you can kind of be, obviously you may have a preference because sometimes you enjoy one thing more than another. But at the end of the day, I think to really be a strong marketer, you have to have a kind of a good balance of really the skill sets that are required for both of those
Yeah.
areas.
Well, so I'm curious just to hear a little bit about your journey to your current role. What was the path like to go from USC and graduate school, and to now CMO of Teradata? What was that path? I know you've been there a little over 2 years now, I think.
Right. I've been here a little bit over 2 years. Um, it's really interesting because I think, as I mentioned, I started off in like I'm an economist, and I started off in finance and accounting, and I didn't even know what a chief market officer was when I started my career.
Right.
To be brutally honest,
Yeah.
my father was a minister, my mother is a retired principal, so I didn't have people around me that were like kind of these corporate people. So I really had no idea what I was doing.
Hmm.
And at some point, when I actually had left telecommunications, and that was uh, probably 2 years after I had graduated from grad school, and my husband and I and our first child, our son, were living in Illinois. I We wanted to come back to California, and my husband, like without me knowing, had sent my resume to Oracle for a marketing role, and it was leading pricing and licensing for Oracle, and that was kind of my first entree into kind of this world of technology, which I love. Now, at that time, I had been a P&L leader. I was a general manager, but I we had our second child, and we were out in Illinois with like no family, and we desperately wanted to get back to the West Coast. And when I had that interview, I happened to be upstairs with the baby,
Hmm.
and I heard the phone ring, but I'm doing my thing with the like newborn, and my husband kind of runs upstairs and says, "Hey, I sent your resume into this job, and the guy is on the phone." And I had like in 30 seconds, I had to kind of figure
Oh.
out like, okay, what are you talking about? And okay, let me kind of fake my way through this kind of initial phone screen, which I faked my way through, and somewhat the rest is history. But that was my first kind of what I would call really solid marketing position. I was running, but kind of combined what I was good at too, which was like, the analytics, it was pricing and licensing. And then they gave me strategic marketing. And I was like, kind of the fake it till you make it thing. I think that's totally true. Never tell someone that you can't do something, just kind of figure out how to do it. And then I became like 2 years in, I became like a vice president. And I was like, that's when I kind of got the bug, because then I was like meeting with other senior leaders, and I felt to myself, I think I can do that. And I knew that I needed to navigate my way out of just this kind of mathy, technical kind of, like what I could have been just she's that typecast into this
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
role. And I did something that was, I think, pretty bold at the time.
Mhm.
Was I was getting recruited by GE, and I literally was like, I gotta go do this job. And my husband has always been like kind of really supportive, and he's like, let's go for it. We knew nobody on the East Coast, and when I came to GE, it was about running kind of a COE that was on segmentation And I had some really good, at the time I didn't know it, people that were outside of GE that were mentors to me. And one of them was Larry Light, because we had hired him as a consultant. Now, Larry Light was the former chief marketing officer of McDonald's. And so for a year, we were using him to do some work at GE that I was running and leading. And I was just learning and learning and learning. And I said to myself, I think I can do this job that people call a chief marketing officer. I feel like I could do this at some point. And then I said to myself, these are the kinds of experiences from a job perspective that I needed to have. So when I left GE, I went back to technology because that was the one thing that I knew I was passionate about and I loved. And I could combine this spirit of innovation with this kind of always on intellectual curiosity that technologists have. And like they kind of get marketing but don't get it, but I could kind of start building my skills. And so then I was at IBM for almost 9 to 10 years, and I had my first two divisional marketing jobs at IBM. And I'm like really grateful for those opportunities, because when you're a divisional CMO, like everyone then gets it like, oh, she's CMO of a $15 billion thing. She could probably be CMO of a public company thing, whether it's that size or smaller. So I knew that that was giving me enough experience to say, I could go do this somewhere else. And I really did want to do it at a public company. So I left IBM after I had done two specific divisional CMO roles there. And then I went to Nielsen.
And
And
you were there
that
almost 10 years at IBM, right?
almost 10 years at
Yeah.
IBM. And then I went to Nielsen for about 2.5 years. And then Teradata knocked on the door with this opportunity. And I thought it was a fantastic opportunity to take a brand that was a legacy brand and do everything that I had learned pretty much for like the last decade and a half, and just kind of really do all those things that I knew that I could do, that, I could show it on my own. So
Hmm.
that was really kind of the journey that I got here, of how I got here.
Wow, very cool. Well, and you've had an interesting path in terms of like talk about some powerhouse companies and brands
Totally.
between Oracle and GE and IBM and Nielsen and now Teradata. It's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool path.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your role as CMO. Tell me about your team. Like, what does your team look like, and what does the role entail at this point?
Well, I have everything in terms of marketing and communications for the company. So whether it's content and brand, whether it's similar to what I had at Nielsen, like the what you would call the chief digital officer. That person reports to me. So I have the whole marketing technology stack, which is really important to me, particularly
Yeah.
being a person who is really a technologist. I mean, I ran technical teams actually when I was at IBM. So it's an area that I understand really well.
Yeah.
And so I have data scientists that report to me. So what I created a COE that was called revenue marketing. I think the most important thing for any CMO to be able to do is understand how your organization actually makes money.
Hmm.
It's not just, hey, I need a return on my marketing investment. It is, do I have actual line of sight of how widgets get sold, whether that widget is a physical product, a product that's not physical, maybe digital, or it is a service. How does that sales motion happen? And how do you affect that? That is the most important thing that you can do as a marketer, because then you don't run into the arguments of, I don't know what you contribute, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
in,
Right.
I don't know if it's
Right.
this. So I have a revenue marketing COE that reports to me. I have data scientists that report to me. So I have a whole thought leadership construct. Additionally, uh, product marketing, communications, operations. I mean, you kind of name the principal
Hmm.
things, that all reports into me. And the great partnership that I feel like I have, that I think is different than some of the other companies that I worked with, is that marketing does have a true seat at the table. It is part, even on the investment cases, we're part of those teams, or I'm part of that team at the ELT level, and have input on the overall investments that we're making, whether that investment is marketing or a product or something else. And so
Hmm.
our leadership team is just very balanced in its approach to every component is important to us being successful and driving growth for the company.
Awesome. So that's an amazing path. That's an amazing, you're the fact that you own all of that within the team is a little bit unique. I mean, there are plenty of CMOs that don't touch the MarTech stack specifically. There are CMOs that don't have data scientists that report into them and things like that. That's pretty cool. You kind of talked a little bit about your superpower. I'm curious if you had to sum up your superpower in one simple thing, what is the superpower? And then I'm going to ask you a question about advice, career advice.
I think that my personal superpower is, like, kind of first and foremost, probably my sense of humor.
Hmm.
Um, I can tend to be, I'm very serious, but I'm also very funny. So I tend to try to lighten up situations, even situations that are serious and critical, and things that hard things that we're trying to get done. And I am the queen of analogies. I will use an analogy for most anything, to not just kind of soften the way that something lands, but kind of, everyone has context around certain things and simple things. And when you explain it in simple ways, you don't have to explain things to make other people like, oh, well, you don't understand row level like locking in the database. That's like ridiculous. I don't necessarily, someone doesn't need to understand that. They just need to know that that's an important security feature that kind of has been in those products for like years or decades. Um, but it's that kind of thing where I think it is, kind of just being relatable, and trying just to work collaboratively to get the job done.
Love it. Is there a piece of advice that you either wish that you'd gotten early in your career, or maybe that you would dispense to a young marketer that's just beginning their career?
I think that the best advice that, if I was looking back, and it's the same thing that you tell people when their kids are applying to college. When my kids were applying to college, of course, everyone says, your kids are going to get into the school that they're supposed to get into, and everyone is like, uh, that may be true, but people really don't believe it because they think of some other things. And if your kids are good students, they kind of, they end up where they, what is really best for them, and they have a great experience. And someone told me that, and I did believe it, and I kind of trusted the process. I think that in a work environment, I also think that that's true. Are you in a place that makes you feel wholesome, and that you can be the best you? I don't think it's great for people to be in companies or places where it's nothing about, hey, bring your authentic self, because I think that's kind of jargony.
Hmm.
It's more about, when you show up, are you having fun and enjoying yourself? When you show up, do you feel included and feel like you're part of the team? When you show up, are people putting you in a position to give you the opportunity to show your best work and to show your best self? Is that the kind of environment that you're in? If you cannot answer yes to those three questions, then you need to go to another environment.
Hmm.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of companies. The Fortune 500 is just that, it's 500. And, working at one of them may be great for some experiences, and some people not working at them is fine too. But make sure that you're really at a place that I think, on balance, nurtures you as a person so that you can grow and get the skills that you need to essentially elevate yourself if that's your goal. And if that's not your goal, and you just want to go and be at a place where you can work and have fun, and you're okay with being, a manager, senior manager, there's nothing wrong with that. Just make that sure that you're somewhere where people value you and that you can create value. And I think when you do that, I actually do think you have, kind of the right attitude about what your career is, what it should be, and what you can aspire to be.
100%. So I'm curious if there's some specific values that you either want to demonstrate as a leader, or maybe values that you would demand of people to be on your team.
Well, I think the values that you demand of people on your team is a mutual trust. If you can't trust the people that work for you, I don't think they should be on the team. If you can't trust your leadership, I don't think you should be on their team.
Mm-hmm.
I think trust is really important. And if you can't trust someone, then it's kind of game over for me. Now, what's different for me is I generally start with trust. I don't start with, you got to prove yourself to me. I'm not going to trust you until, certain things happen. I generally start with trust, and that has served me well. It doesn't mean that at some point in time I haven't been burned, but if you start with trust, you're kind of starting with positive intent, and you believe that the person that's across the table from you wants to do the right thing, and you want to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
You always know at some point when people don't want to do the right thing. And ultimately, it generally does catch up with them. It may not be tomorrow, and it may not
Right.
be a week or a year, but it's hard to kind of keep skating away from that when you're just not good or not doing the right thing. And so I think if you kind of focus on really having good and strong, healthy relationships, to me, that's what's best.
Awesome. Awesome advice. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Here at Setup, we're marketing matchmakers. And what that typically means is that we live in the world in between brands or clients and agencies. We're not on the agency side, we're not on the client side, but we live in that space between, we connect them together. I'm curious just generally how you like to work with agencies. What's your philosophy on working with marketing agencies at Teradata or even in a previous life?
Well, I think it's really interesting because we did an entire rebrand when I was at Nielsen,
Mm,
and that was during COVID. Like, 4 months
yeah.
after I started, COVID happened, and the agency that we chose was Interbrand, and we never met with any of the Interbrand team. The
Right,
first
right.
time that I met with the Interbrand team was literally I just went to an event with them in at the Nasdaq in December, and
Wow.
this literal like 4-year relationship that I had been having with this team, and kind of Penny and others. It was like, oh my God, I'm finally seeing you in person.
Wow.
So the and I think that speaks to the what I just said, which is the first principle of trust, right? Can I trust that this agency understands what my goals and objectives are, and are they as invested in those goals as I am? And if the answer to that question is no, you need to get another agency. Um, they, you don't, want to be, whether it's a small agency or something that's boutique, you need to believe and have the feeling that, maybe you're not their only client, but you are the client at the time that you're having your meetings and your conversations, and that they have not just shown up to a meeting and giving you things that you could have Googled yourself on the internet.
Right,
Like,
right, 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 right.
I mean, as soon as you see kind of, the L word, which is lazy, then that is like kind of pull the ripcord for me. And
Yeah,
that is the first thing. Like, don't tell me things that I already know and that
right.
are really understood, especially if you're trying to win the business. You have to be able to demonstrate, like, what value can you bring? We're in a highly competitive environment, and the belief now, that people can Gen AI their way into content is, is in some ways, it's not ridiculous, right? If you do something on Chat GPT, and you write a run-on sentence and you put it in there and say, make this pithier, you're going to get
Right.
a that's pithier, and it's not going to be a run-on sentence. So saying that something provides better grammar and kind of uses the right synonyms, that's good. But that uh system, those digits, does not understand the ethos of your company,
Yeah. Right.
doesn't understand the ethos of your customers. That
Yeah.
is what you're there for. Technology is good. It's important. It's the way we move forward, but it is not the replacer of humans for critical thinking.
100%. 100%. Okay. So I'm curious if there are certain disciplines of marketing that you feel you typically would want to own in-house, and are there certain other disciplines that you appreciate getting external perspective or external expertise? Like, I don't want to say always or never, but are there certain
Yeah,
things you
I
just
think
want to
people go
own?
back, and I think the truthful answer is it depends. I think people go back and forth on this. I do think you need an agency that really understands media, and how to deploy it, and making sure that that's done well, and that it can feed into your demand generation and lead systems, and customer acquisition systems. You 100% need that, and you need,
Yeah.
generally, I think you need an agency for that, unless you're a really big company and you're kind of running all that stuff yourself. And even when I was at IBM, even IBM, a really big company, multi billion dollar spend on marketing, we had an agency, to help support that effort. I also think that, um, there are, uh, great agencies that help you create more memorable experiences.
Yeah. Right.
So if you're doing specific customer experiences throughout the year, that those aren't happening every day. You don't need a full-time staff
Right. Right. Right.
to do that every day. It's probably best to get an agency to help with that, because guess what? They are doing it every day. They're doing it for multiple clients. So they're bringing their own best of practices. They're bringing their own state of the art thinking, because they just did, something that, whether it was, in London, or something that was, at Moscone Center in San Francisco. All of those are more opportunities than you're ever going to have. They've been
Right.
everywhere. They've been in every city. You've been in some. And so, kind of sharing those best practices and helping you think through even location strategy, I have found that very, very valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also I'll say a lot of times when you work with an agency that has clients from different industries, they can pull best practices from other industries that you might not have considered
Correct.
if it was just your internal team that only deals in your one industry kind of thing.
I think that's very true. And I also think that you may say, what have you done with others? And then when you do it in your industry for the first time, it's like, you're the smartest thing since sliced bread. But
Right, right. It's innovation. Right, right. It becomes innovation. Yeah. Well, okay, so I'm curious if there's a program or a campaign or something, either at Teradata or in a previous life, that taught you a great deal because either it was a miserable failure and you learned something valuable that you really needed to learn, or maybe it was a huge success that you'd like to emulate again in the future someday.
I think that there are two that I think are kind of really positive experiences for me. And one that was kind of positive, and then for me, and then it looked like it was negative later on.
Hmm.
The first is the work that I have done in the past with Interbrand on branding. They have been great, just really great to work with. We just did a rebrand at Teradata, and both of those instances have been really awesome. What I found interesting is after I left Nielsen, the creative director reached out to me, and this was like last year, so this was in 2023, and they had changed their colors. Now, when we did the rebrand, we had this really kind of bright green, and the new CEO that came in had come from a company that was, financial services and kind of blue, and kind of kept trying to go to the blue color that he had at his old company. and and so
He
I,
had a
I
type, he had a style.
he had a type, he had a style, and I just and what I thought was funny or interesting was when I looked at their major competitor uh did a rebrand, and they use bright and vibrant colors because that's what that is, kind of when you look at the profiles of whether it's Gen Z or millennials, kind of things are skewing younger, colors are fresh and bright and they're energetic, and it's kind of not the quote, blue suit red tie
Right.
IBM, and they kind of changed their colors to this muted kind of color, and I didn't feel bad because they weren't using the brand that we had developed. I felt bad that it looked like in the comparison of what you see out there, and how even kind of uh, what was formerly conservative brands have really brightened and freshened and have a lot of energy, and are using kind of colors that they wouldn't have used a decade ago. I think Accenture is a great example of that. They're kind of that purple slash fuchsia color, and I think it's really hot. And this is a company that's a consulting company,
Right,
and couldn't be more conservative. Like
right.
they conservative company. So it's always interesting when you see things like that happen over time. So of course you're like, wow, we all thought that was a bright image for you. Understand that if you move to something else, that's always disappointing when someone's worked on something for a long time.
Yeah, right.
But
Well,
but but to each his own. Everyone has their choice, but very interesting. And when we did our rebrand, one of the things that we did at Teradata was we wanted to make sure that we were 100% not going to be thought of as legacy, because in the career of a
yeah,
company, 40 years really isn't that long. I mean, if you can
yeah.
go back to some very like long in the tooth companies, but the evolution of the way that we're thinking about the digital environment, whether that's the metaverse, whether it's, kind of all of the things that we now have to deal with in terms of channels and the way people interact and engage, we wanted to make sure that our brand represented that. So when you just look at even our iconography, it always looks like it's moving up and to the right, and that's on purpose because we want to look like, hey, we not only do we have energy and momentum, but where we want to carry you is up into the kind of, of any chart, it's always up and to the right is always best.
I love that. That's clever. So I'm gonna wrap things up with a couple of questions just for fun. They're not necessarily like marketing specific, but I'm curious if there's a quote or a sports team or a book or a movie or a band that inspires you, and what is it about that thing that inspires you the most?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, Well, one of my favorite books is, and it's an old book, but it's one that I've kind of read probably a few times, and that's Who Moved My Cheese,
Hmm,
because I love the notion of, when you think about companies and the parallelism of people trying to do the same thing, expecting a different outcome.
right.
The analogy all the time, the West Coast offense worked until it didn't. If you're basketball, I'm sorry, if you're a football fan, you understand that
Yeah, yeah,
statement.
yeah.
The triangle offense worked until it didn't. If you're basketball,
Right.
also understand that. And so there are times with everything that we do, we can be really successful for a long time doing maybe some of the same things. And at some point, other people understand that strategy, and other people can defend against it, and they can, disrupt you. And so Who Moved My Cheese is about the disruption, and
Hmm.
that there were choices to be made, and the choice to kind of keep going to the same thing, getting less and less, or taking that leap to move from where you are to a place that was going to provide you more opportunity. And I just love that story, and I think it's a very important lesson just in life for kind of like everything.
I love it. So, all right, last question is outside of your family, because that's an easy one. Where do you find joy outside of work? Like, do you have hobbies or things that you love to do, you know, outside of family?
I have what used to be a 5 a.m. boot camp that I was doing for over a decade. And during COVID, it went to 6 a.m. and we were doing it at home. And I haven't, this was 5 days a week. And
Wow.
unless you were traveling, it was 5 days a week. 9 years in, we went to 4 days a week. After COVID, the woman who is, kind of the teacher, leader, all this stuff, she had moved to Savannah, so we were all doing Zoom, and I miss them tremendously.
Mm.
It is I do the class when I can, but it is a not just a circle of support. It is the thing that brings me pure joy. It is
Hmm.
one of my favorite things in life to do, not just the kind of workout. She's really tough. So, like, maybe not that exactly, but just the feeling of camaraderie. And I used to tell them when I used to travel, and if I, was gone and then I came back, and they, oh, Jackie, I was thinking about you. They call me Jackie, not Jacqueline. And I always knew that they were, when I was traveling on the road, that they were praying for me and wishing me well. And that means a lot.
That's
So it's
cool. To have it, you
favorite,
felt the support. You felt the support even across miles. That's great.
I could be on a different continent.
All right, I have one more quick bonus question for you, which is there a brand that you've never worked on that you really admire, and what is it that you admire about that brand?
I am an Apple fanatic, bigot, whatever you want to call it. I love them. I love them. I love them. I love the integration. I love how everything works together. I think it's very smart and clever and clean. And so it's probably one of my favorites.
So tell the truth. Have you ever been one of those people in line waiting for the next one to come out, next phone to come out?
I actually haven't been that person.
Okay, fair.
I ask people who wait in line for anything for 3 days, and they're like
Hey.
sleeping bags. I don't care what it is. It could be. I mean, it could be Taylor Swift. It could be Beyonce. I mean, I
Yeah,
really like them both. It could be either of them, and I'm sorry, I like them, but I'm not sleeping on a sidewalk.
fair, totally fair. Totally fair. All right. Well, so Jacqueline Woods is the Chief Marketing Officer for Teradata. Jacqueline, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for the
Thank
conversation.
you. Thank you. This has been great. Really enjoyed it.